Okay, here we go. Good morning, officially. Welcome to Wednesday. Hope everyone's feeling okay. As I said, if you're following politics in Canada, you'll know that we're going to have an election next week. It's going to be very unexciting because, as I say, the election is about nothing. Nothing will probably change, and it will remain status quo. Anyway. It's the election for the federal government. So basically the way it works in Canada is that every riding, so all these little geographic parts of Canada, they'll all elect a representative, and the party with the most representatives forms government, and the party's leader becomes prime minister. So we don't have a president, and we don't actually vote for the prime minister. So right now, Justin Trudeau is the prime minister, but he's only prime minister because he's the leader of the Liberal Party. And the Liberal Party has the most representation. They have the most representatives in government, right? If we do the election and it turns out the Conservatives have the most, then the Conservatives will form government and Aaron O'Toole will be prime minister because he is the leader of the Conservative Party. So it's kind of a weird system. Really, the only people who vote for Justin Trudeau are the people in his little riding, the little place that he represents, which is a place in Montreal called, it's called Papineau something. So it's this one little section of Montreal that he represents, and those people will vote directly for Justin. But the rest of us will just vote for the representative in our area, and then whoever comes out with the most people, the most seats, gets to form government, and their leader gets to be prime minister. But, as I say, the polls are suggesting that it won't be really much different from what it is now. So, although there is a slight chance that we will have a new prime minister next week, but we will see. Okay, so Aria's here. Good morning, Aria. Nice to see you. Let's jump into where we were yesterday when we had moved on from kind of hominid evolution, and we're looking at prehistory. So we're just looking at human beings. We're looking at Homo sapiens now, and pardon me, I wanted to pay particular attention to subsistence because we said that culture is an integrated whole. All the parts of culture are connected to each other and work together. And subsistence is a very important part of culture, right? Because, before anything else happens, right? Before you have politics or elections or, economic systems or anything like that, people need to eat, right? People definitely need to eat. If they don't eat, they get very grumpy. And so hangry even. So kind of everything else about a culture is based on how they get their food. And we said, I'm just going to jump a little bit ahead here. There were kind of good morning. There were kind of 5 ways in which humans can get their food. We, of course, get our food through mechanized agriculture for the most part, right? We have big industrial farms that grow grains and fruits and vegetables and pigs and chickens and cows and things like that. And we buy that food at the grocery store, right? But really, the first, our original subsistence strategy as humans was foraging, was hunting and gathering. And so yesterday, bless you. Yesterday I was trying to give you a picture of what the hunter-gatherer lifestyle looked like, right? I said that, sorry, I'm going to jump over this because we've seen it already, that hunter-gatherers usually move around quite a bit, right? So they have no permanent houses, they have no permanent villages. They tend to, really every few days, they tend to move somewhere else, right? They live in temporary shelters. Sometimes they make those shelters, sometimes they're tents that they bring with them. But they're really always on the move. And being on the move all the time allows them to easily find food where they are. They don't have to work too hard for the food. And then they move on before the food is depleted, right? So their subsistence strategy relies on mobility, right, on moving around quite a bit, okay? I said that most hunter-gatherers live in small groups, usually under 50 people, but sometimes a little bit more. Hunter-gatherer groups are very cooperative. Of course, they know each other very well because they live together. Sometimes they bump into other hunter-gatherer groups, but if we're looking at prehistory, if we're looking at, say, 20,000 years ago, there's not that many people on the planet, right? I said we're estimating maybe 5 to 8 million people in the entire world, right? So, yeah, as a hunter-gatherer group, you would probably go quite a while without seeing other people, right? And you know, the number of people that you and I have seen today, just coming here, right, on the bus or on the SkyTrain, walking into the building. Morning, Tina. Hunter-gatherers would never have seen that many people, right? There just weren't that many people around. Yeah, so we said they moved quite a bit. Yeah, lived in all kinds of different environments. So we have hunter-gatherers that live in jungles. We have hunter-gatherers that lived in open plains. We had hunter-gatherers living in the Arctic. We have people living basically in all kinds of different environments. And again, the environment is going to influence the subsistence strategy, right? What is available to you determines what you eat, right? That's not rocket science, right? I said yesterday, and I think this is roughly where we left off, that these people we should really think of them as highly skilled outdoorsmen, right? They're outdoor and outdoors women. They're out there all the time. They know their environment like they know their own house, right? They know all the plants, all the animals. They know where to find food. They know how to predict the weather. They know how to make tools and clothing and all of the things that they need to survive. And so this is a way of life that is very skill-based, right? You really need to know what you're doing in order to survive this way. And I said yesterday, if you dropped any of us in the middle of, the wilderness, we'd probably all die, right? Maybe some of us have some camping or outdoor experience that might help us out, but we're not going to make it, right? And these people, again, really know what they're doing. I also mentioned that we should also think of them as Olympic athletes, right? Because they're very well nourished usually. They eat a lot of different types of food. They get a lot of nutrients, and they're very active, right? They're always moving around and, running after food. And so most of the skeletal remains that we have of hunter-gatherers suggest that they were in exceptionally good shape, right? Think big, tall, strong, healthy people. I said that most hunter-gatherer societies are egalitarian, meaning they're relatively equal. They treat genders differently, as basically all societies do. Some people get a little more respect, right? We tend to respect our elders. Maybe if you're a particularly good hunter or something, people might give you kudos for that. But mostly people are, at the same level. And again, there's an expectation of sharing. Most hunter-gatherers don't really have a strong concept of private property. This is mine, that's yours, right? Things are shared very widely. And if you don't share, that's bad, right? You're a bad person if you don't share. So what I'm describing here, because I'm going to contrast this with complex foragers or complex hunter-gatherers. This is what we refer to as simple hunter-gatherers, okay, or simple foragers. So you can see here, again, small mobile camps. They move around a lot. They don't really have a lot of stuff, right? The only things they own or use are the things that they need to survive. They don't have much of a social structure, right? Everyone is roughly equal. They don't store any food, right? So they collect enough food for maybe a day or so. They eat it, and then they move on, and they have to find more food. There's no stored food. In terms of their food use, they tend to eat just whatever is around, right? Whatever is easy to whatever nature kind of presents to them that day, that's really what they eat, okay? And again, their technology is usually very light, very portable, very simple, because again, they're moving around quite a bit, okay? So, to kind of illustrate this, and due to a request I had yesterday, I wanted to give you a little window into the world of some foragers, some hunter-gatherers, okay? And again, there's not many of these people, good morning, there's not many of these people left, right? Most of the world gets their food through farming or the keeping of animals, right? Very few of us hunt and gather anymore, right? This is basically people just don't do this anymore. But there are some places in which they do, and I'm going to show you here the Hadza people who live here in Tanzania on the kind of on the shores of Lake Eyasi, okay? And so the Hadza have been living kind of in this area for thousands and thousands of years, or at least their ancestors have. And they have kind of a traditional area that they have lived in for this period. But you can see by those little grain symbols or grain icons, they're kind of being pushed out of their original range by farmers, right? So there's people who have moved in, in sort of modern times and kind of pushed them back into a smaller territory. But they still live in this area. There's a collection of Hadza people who are full-on hunter-gatherers. I might be wrong about this, but as far as I know, the government has in the past tried to encourage them to, give up their hunter-gathering ways and, join us in the 20th century or, get a job kind of thing. But the Hadza don't really want to do that. They like their style of living, and they're happy and healthy, and so they continue to do it. What I'm going to show you is a little video made by a guy who was engaged in some culture tourism. So it seems what you can do is through a guide, you can actually go and hang out with the Hadza, and they'll take you hunting, and you'll get to see their camp, and you'll just get to see what life is like with them. So, the Hadza are, living a very traditional, human existence. But of course, they're connected to the modern world as well. You'll see them wearing clothes like, we do, that they've traded for. So, they know what's up. But they're still, practicing this traditional subsistence strategy, which is interesting to see. So I'm going to show you a video, and in it, it will, this guy will go along with them, and we'll just get to see maybe a little bit of what it's like. I'm going to warn you ahead of time that there's a couple of parts of the video that are a little graphic. So they're going to go hunting, they're going to kill a few animals. There's actually going to be a scene with a baby deer that's a little bit, or a baby kudu that's, it's a little uncomfortable. But maybe if you don't want to look, don't look. There's no blood or guts or anything. But, let's try to remember our cultural relativism, right? We're not going to judge their culture by our rules. We're going to judge it by theirs. And to imagine that this is, a way that people survived and got their food, right? And so we eat, pigs and chickens and cows, and, we don't have to kill them, but somebody did, right? So, these guys have to do it for themselves. Right? So, as I say, if you don't want to watch, just kind of look away. It's a little bit sad, but people do have to eat as well, right? So, right. So what I'm going to do? Give me just 2 seconds here because I just need to. Oh no, I don't need to do that. Good, I don't need to do that. Just give me 10 seconds here. I got to grab the link for this video because online people will of course need to see it as well. So for online people, I've just put the link into the live chat there. You can see it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to watch the video, and again we're going to look into the life of the Hadza people. Okay, so try to pay attention to their technology, okay, what kind of tools they use, listen to their language, and just kind of, I guess, try to get an experience of what this is like, right? Again, I hope you're not disturbed by the killing of a couple of animals, but that's how these people eat, right? And all meat that you eat was killed by someone, so, you know, hopefully it's okay. Ready to watch? Okay. So online people, of course, the link is in the live chat there, so I'll direct you to go and watch the video. It's about 20 minutes, and so we'll watch it, and then we'll probably take a break and then come back and talk about the video, okay? But we'll watch first. So, yeah, so online people, go and do that, and then we'll see you back here after the video is done, okay? So good luck there. See you soon. Okay. There. Man, that was exciting, wasn't it? That was a wild ride. Again, I'm not going to make any comments about, culture tourism or this guy's whole chase your bliss thing. I'm going to leave that aside. But we did get to meet some Hadza hunter-gatherers, right? And see what their lives were like. What's kind of your reaction to what we saw? What did you think? It was good? How so? They don't have any pressure?
They don't have any pressure. They just do what they want good.
Yeah.
Just relax.
Kind of, right? They have in many ways, they have a very simple life, right? They go out, most days looking for food. I assume that hunting was a lot easier in the past, right? Because Africa has been, very heavily developed and there's lots of agriculture and things. But thousands of years ago, when there was none of that, I assume there were more animals and it was probably easier for them to hunt than it is now. Still seem to be doing okay though. Yeah, but it's a very simple, kind of a simple way of life, right? Just get your food and go hunting and then hang out in camp in the evening and smoke a joint and, Yeah, what else did you think? What's that? It's well, I think it was definitely adventure for the host here, right? But yeah, it is kind of, and you never know what's going to happen, right? You never know every day what you're going to find. Maybe you're successful on the hunt, maybe you aren't. Maybe you find some honey and it's a nice little bonus, right? Because all of us humans have a bit of a sweet tooth, right? We all like the sugar, and the Hadza are no exception, right? So they dug into the honey. Has anyone had honey like from a honeycomb like that before? No? What's that? Yeah, they had the larva, right? We're still in it. I've had honey from the comb, but I've never had it like with larvae in it. But again, those things are that's food, right? And there's some protein and fat in those things, and so you're getting sugar and protein and fat, and there's a lot of energy, right? There's a lot of calories there, which these guys need to survive, right? And it's tasty. Anybody not like honey here? No, don't like it? Too sweet? Felicia, I don't even know what you're talking about. Are you sure you're okay? Should I call a doctor? Too sweet. So, yeah, what else? This is quite an adventure, right? This is exciting. You never know what's going to happen every day. What else? It seems what? Yeah, those things that were collected, everyone's going to get to share, right? They got the little bat, they got the bird, they got the mongoose and the little kudu, and the women found some, I forget the name of the root that they mentioned, but yeah, and everyone's going to share in that, right? Everyone gets to eat, regardless of whether you personally were successful or not. Yeah, everyone shares, everyone gets to eat. That one guy, I bet he's quite a storyteller. The one guy who was making all the sounds, and yeah, he seems. I'd be curious to know what he was saying, because he seems like a very interesting and animated fellow. Anything else? Sorry, there's no what? Yeah, right. So we don't see a lot of social status differences, right? They do have a leader, right? They do have a chief, and they set aside a particular type of meat from the kudu for him. There's a little mark of respect, but yeah, we everyone's kind of on the same level, right? They're on the same team. Arian here says it's very interesting because those people don't like to change their lifestyles and don't accept tourists, but they're very hospitable. Yeah, they seemed pretty accepting of. I should have got the guy's name, the host. Did anyone catch his name? No. Yeah, they seemed pretty accepting of him, right? They kind of treated him as one of their own kind of thing, right? Even though, they'd never met him before. Yeah, they seemed to take good care of him, right? Even though he got kind of cut up in the process, right? From thorns and grass and everything. These Hadza guys are tough, eh? Yeah, I guess your skin gets pretty tough, moving through the thorns and the grass all the time. And good runners too, right? That guy looked like he was in pretty good shape, but couldn't keep up with the Hadza, right? They were off, right, after those baboons. Yeah, they were very nice. What else? Anything else we noticed? Using the what? Oh, the tools. Yeah, so we saw them. What were they doing? Yeah, right? They were starting a fire with the little rotating stick method. Not easy to do, of course, for them. Simple, right? They know how to do it, right? We saw their different kinds of arrows, right? Depending on the type of animal they're hunting, they have different arrows, poison arrows and bird arrows and all kinds of things. But we didn't really see much in terms of other tools, right? They had their arrows and their bow. They had, they could make a fire fairly easily. I think they had a knife to, cut up the food. That's kind of it, right? They've got their weed, right? Which again, they said is part of their culture. I don't know. I think it's kind of a recent addition to their culture. But it's worth saying that basically all cultures around the world have, substances that they use to kind of alter their mind a little bit, right? Whether it's tea or whether it's, beans that have caffeine in them, or whether they're psychedelic substances, or whether they're sort of marijuana type things. Cultures all around the world use these types of things, and hunter-gatherers undoubtedly would have used them, right? Maybe they would have used them for ritual purposes. Here, the Hadza are just kind of using it like, like cigarettes, right? You get an animal, have a smoke break, go back out there, right? And so it seems like that's how they're using it. Again, I don't know if it's necessarily part of their culture. I don't know that marijuana naturally grows in Tanzania. Maybe it does, but lots of cultures use, psychotropic, psychedelic, or kind of pharmacological substances in some way. So it might have taken you a little off guard to see these hunter-gatherers smoking a joint, but I assure you there's nothing strange about that, really. Anything else that was interesting? One thing I'll point out too is that the host said, we domesticated dogs 10,000 years ago. Way before that. It's probably closer to about 35,000 years ago. So humans have had dogs with them for 30 or 35,000 years, although it's not quite clear because the first dogs that we have evidence for, like their skeletal remains, they look a lot like wolves because we haven't bred them into dogs yet. So it's kind of hard to tell what's a dog and what's a wolf 30,000 years ago. But yeah, he's wrong. They're actually, humans have had dogs for quite a bit longer than that. So they're the first animal that we domesticate, and kind of interestingly, they're still with us, right? They're still living in our homes and helping us with things. Anything else that you saw that was interesting or that kind of made you pay attention a little closer?
They're cooperating to hunt and eat.
They're hunting and eating. Yeah. So yeah, we saw them do that, and sometimes that's the thing about hunter-gatherers too, is that, they kind of eat all day long, right? They're always finding things. If the guys walk by, if they're out hunting and they see berries and they're hungry, they'll just grab some berries and pop them in, right? And sometimes, they'll cook a little bit of an animal on the way, right? Just as a little snack, like the kudu. They ate some of the kudu before they got back to camp, but they brought most of it back with them for everyone, right? So they kind of incorporated both of those things. Sometimes they're eating, sometimes they're hunting. It's a very kind of flexible system, right? Yeah, one with less pressure, I guess. As long as you can find enough food, things are good, right? Anything else? Kind of like that video, actually. I think that was a good. And I like that he had the GoPro on his head, so you could like run along with them and try to keep up with these guys. As I say, think Olympic athletes. These guys will outrun anybody, right? Those guys can run for days, no problem. Anything else? Oh yeah, right. So we saw like the little kudu. Of course, they ate the kudu. They're going to eat basically everything, right? The meat, the fat, the organ meat. Which actually is another important thing to point out, is that hunter-gatherers, they really like organ meat. Organ meat is really rich in minerals and nutrients and antioxidants and things like that. I can't speak for your cultures. Here in Western culture, we tend to like get a little weird about organ meat, but actually it's super nutritious, and most people who hunt and gather go for the organs first, right? So the tongue, which was reserved for the chief, the liver, the heart, stuff like that, is the kidney. Those things are very mineral and nutrient rich, right? The muscle tissue, which is kind of what we eat here in the West, yeah, they'll still eat it, but it's not as good as the organ meat and the fat. That's what people like this are really interested in. But anyway, sorry, Felicia was saying, yeah, they're going to eat it, but they're also going to turn the rest of the animal into other things, right? The skin can become clothing, the bones can become tools, right? They can carve them into different types of tools. And so every part of that kudu can be used for something, right? Yeah, that's cool. Anything else? That's the thing about simple foragers here, is they tend not to save anything. So they'll collect food, they'll eat it all. Maybe there'll be some leftovers for tomorrow, right? If they don't eat all of it, they'll eat a little bit tomorrow. But they kind of, they shop for the day, if you will. They don't fill any storage with food. So it's just kind of day to day. They go day to day in terms of their food, right? So what we saw there, that'll probably cover them for today and maybe a bit of tomorrow. And then they'll be out again, right? Foraging, the women foraging for roots and berries and nuts and seeds and things like that. And the men out trying to hunt, right? Trying to find some meat, some animals to hunt, or some honey, right? And I think they brought the honey back too. I saw them, they had a plastic water jug that was cut out in the top, so yeah, so they could bring the honey back for everyone else. Yeah. Cool. Any last thoughts? Okay, let's take a little break. That was really good. Let's take a little break. We'll come back and then we'll talk about hunter-gatherers, but complex ones, which are a little bit different. Okay, so take a break, come back, and then we'll do that. Okay, and we are back. So, again, just a little kind of window into the world of the Hadza, right? And again, they're only one type of hunter-gatherer, and all hunter-gatherers would have been different, right? Different cultures, different languages. We heard some very interesting language from them, right? And the Hadza language is what they call a click language, right? So it uses little clicks and as actual letters and sounds, right? So again, all languages use a set of sounds. Some sounds are part of the language, some sounds aren't, and so yeah, these guys include a type of human sound that's not super common in human language, but they're not the only ones. But yeah, really pretty interesting. Any last words about the Hadza before we move on from them? Okay. So, let's see. So I had some photos here. This is actually what the Hadza, this is what they live in. And so they create these, they're just temporary shelters, right? So they find a tree and they'll kind of bend it over and tie it down. They'll put some grass and leaves on top. They have some blankets that they can add on top as well for warmth. And they'll live inside that for, a couple of days, right? It'll just serve as a temporary shelter for them. And then they'll pick up their stuff and move on, right? And very simple shelters. Okay. Now I want to return to our friends here, the Kwakwaka'wakw. We've talked about them earlier. When did we talk about them? What were we talking about? Last week? What did we say about them? They were the thing on hunger, right? We talked about their that hunger was kind of an important symbol in their culture, and we talked about the ritual with the cannibal bird society and all that stuff, right? So the Kwakwaka'wakw here are an excellent example of foragers that are more complex. Okay, so our Hadza are simple foragers, our Kwakwaka'wakw people here are complex foragers. And I don't mean, I certainly don't mean intellectually simple, right? And I don't mean culturally simple. What I mean is that their subsistence strategy is a little more complicated than the Hadza. And I'll explain how that works, okay? So Kwakwaka'wakw people here, again, kind of the north coast of Vancouver Island, and just on the mainland here, you can see their home territory. And again, look at all the different cultures just in this part of British Columbia. This isn't even all of British Columbia. But look at all the different cultures, and imagine that all of those different cultures have a different language, different rituals, a slightly different way of life, right? They're all unique people, right? Similar in some ways, but also unique in some ways as well. Right? Lots of cultural diversity. So we talked about these people, the Cannibal Bird Society. I showed you a few pictures here, and I showed you pictures of what their villages would have looked like. And so if you compare something like this to the Hadza, clearly we have a big cultural difference here, right? The Hadza have very kind of simple technology, very simple structures that they live in. These people are making full-on villages. What's that? Yeah, boats. There's boats there. There's full-on villages with big wooden houses. There's totem poles. There's seawalls. There's all kinds of stuff, right? And maybe that's the first thing we notice about the Kwakwaka'wakw people in comparison to the Hadza. The Kwakwaka'wakw have stuff. They have a lot of things, right? And part of the reason why they have things, why they have stuff, is that they don't move around quite as much as the Hadza do, okay? So I said the Hadza are moving really every few days. They're going to a different place, and they're, temporarily living for a few days all over the landscape. The Kwakwaka'wakw here are going to stay in one place a little longer. And what allows them to do that is the fact that they live in an environment that's very, very rich in terms of food. Okay? There's all kinds of food in this part of the world. Okay? If you think about all the fish in the rivers, if you think about all the fish in the ocean, you've got sea mammals like seals and things like that. You've got clams and mussels. You've got all kinds of fish, which I mentioned. You've got all kinds of land animals to hunt. You have berries and nuts and seeds and roots and things like that. So there's a lot of food in this part of the world. And so it allows these people to live in bigger groups, and it allows them to stay in one place for longer. And again, if you don't have to carry all of your belongings with you, well, you can have more, right? You can have more stuff. And so these people definitely have more stuff, more technology. So these kind of complex foragers are found in places where there's more food, where food is abundant, but sometimes, as I'll explain to you in a second, it is seasonal. It is available seasonally, okay? And so what the Kwakwaka'wakw do is, and this is where the complex part comes in part, what they tend to do is they tend to focus on certain foods at certain times of the year, right? So instead of the Hadza just kind of showing up and saying, okay, what's around? What can we eat? Oh, okay, there's some stuff, let's eat that. The Kwakwaka'wakw are focusing on certain foods at certain times of the year, and they're storing their food, okay? Which is an important difference. The Hadza don't store food. The Kwakwaka'wakw do, right? So one of the things that they do is, or one of the important things that makes the Kwakwaka'wakw complex is their use of salmon. Does everyone know what a salmon is? Big fish, right? Kind of pink, right? On the inside, the meat is pink. Anybody eat salmon? Yeah? Anybody like salmon? No salmon? It is excellent.
Yeah.
Very tasty.
Yeah.
Right? Raw or cooked?
Both.
Both? Yeah. Very tasty fish. No? You're not into salmon or just not into fish, period? No fish? No? For the Kwakwaka'wakw there, they are tasty and they're very important. So, so Arya says, it is awesome. It is pretty awesome. It's great. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So I don't know how much you know about the salmon itself, but it's got a very interesting life cycle, okay? And so what it does is salmon hatch, in this part of the world anyway, they hatch in the rivers of British Columbia here. So you can see there's lots and lots of rivers everywhere in British Columbia. The salmon hatch, they kind of grow up in the rivers, and then they swim out into the ocean. And they kind of live their adult life in the ocean as ocean fish. And when it's time for them to spawn, when it's time for them to lay eggs and reproduce, they swim back into the rivers of British Columbia. And in some cases, they actually swim up the same river that they were born in. How they know this, I have no idea. What's that? What? Maybe. I don't know. But they know. Somehow they know. So they swim up, the rivers are going this way. They swim up against the current. They lay their eggs in the river, and then they die. And that's their life cycle. And so the salmon start coming into the rivers of British Columbia, usually actually almost in this time of year. So maybe in a couple more weeks, the salmon will start to enter the rivers of British Columbia to spawn. And so for the Kwakwaka'wakw, they know this, of course, and they're going to be ready, right? So at this time of year, traditionally, they would be by the rivers. Everybody would be down there. They'd have racks set up here to dry the salmon, right? You'd have women on the shoreline, cutting the salmon up and hanging them on the racks. You have men out in the river with nets or kind of little fish dams or spears, and they're going to collect as much salmon as they possibly can. They're going to cut it up, they're going to dry it out, and they're going to store it away, right? The same thing with fish like this. these are called eulicon, or they're called candlefish. I think they're about this big. They're kind of 10 centimeter long fish. Kwakwaka'wakw people used to harvest them in the thousands, so they'd create a net and just kind of scoop them out of the water. At certain times of the year, there's just tons of them around. And they're called candlefish because if you dry them out, so if you just, leave the fish to dry, they're so oily that you can actually light them on fire. They're so oily. But for the Kwakwaka'wakw, this is great because they take these fish, they boil them up, and then they take the fish oil, they take the fat, and they store the fat away, right? And they do this with all kinds of different foods, nuts, berries, seeds, all kinds of things get dried, stored away for the winter, right? And we talked about how important their stored food was when we had that discussion about hunger, right? So the Kwakwaka'wakw would store their food in big wooden boxes like this. And this one's this is more of a piece of art than a, food storage box. But the Kwakwaka'wakw would build them out of cedar trees, and in many cases the boxes were made of one piece of wood, and they would bend them with steam and water over a fire to the point where they can make them so that they're actually waterproof. You can actually fill this box with oil and it will not leak. The craftsmanship is pretty amazing. This guy here, of course, probably carved this box. Again, it's more of a decorative piece, but the approach is the same. And so with the Kwakwaka'wakw, because they're staying in one place for longer periods of time, and because they are storing their food, they can live together in larger groups. They can make more permanent structures to live in, right? Because they're staying in one place. They can have more technology, right? More specific things, right? And they do. They have a lot of, remember the masks that we saw when we were talking about hunger? Yeah, they can have masks and costumes, right? And boats and different spears and storage boxes and wooden houses and all kinds of things that the Hadza can't have just because the Hadza have to move. They can't carry all that stuff with them. But the Kwakwaka'wakw or are able to have more stuff. And in the process, interestingly, they do have more status differences than the Hadza people. So Kwakwaka'wakw and other indigenous people in this part of the world traditionally, there were chiefs, right? And some of those chiefs came from chief families, right? You were the chief because your father was the chief, and his father before him was the chief, right? There were some people that were lower in society. There were some slaves, in fact, that were captured from other tribes and were kind of held captive by Kwakwaka'wakw and by other indigenous cultures in the area as well. So here we have foragers that are hunting and gathering. They're not farming, they're not keeping any animals, but they have a sort of a more complex subsistence and political and social life because they're able to sort of stay put in one place. They're able to build and have more, and they're able to kind of store food, right? So this is a similar adaptation, but a little bit different, right? And again, it's very common here on the Northwest coast because there's so much food. It's so rich. If you go kind of all the way down to Northern California and all the way up to Alaska, you'll see that there are indigenous cultures. Well, you would have seen that there were indigenous cultures all the way up and down the coast that were kind of like this, complex foragers that have more people living in one place, storing food, and having kind of status differences as well. So again, a little different from our Hadza friends, but created by the fact that this is a very rich place in terms of food. Oh yeah. And I had, well, this isn't quite as good as the Hadza, I was looking for, this is a video that I had from before. I'm just going to pop it into Microsoft, or I'm going to put it into the live chat here. This is a short video that just kind of gives us a little bit of a glimpse into who the Kwakwaka'wakw people are today. Again, it's not as good as the Hadza one. It's not nearly as long. I'll try to bring either the Kwakwaka'wakw or some other indigenous group from British Columbia back in a little bit later so we can have a better sense of who they are. This is just a really short thing, unfortunately. But I'll show it to you anyway. So online people, you can just go and have a look at this video. We'll do the same thing in class here. And then we'll come back and just discuss what we're able to, okay? So I'll see you in just a couple minutes. So I know that's a little disappointing in length because the other one there was so much more to it. But again, you can see a little bit of what's going on, right? We can see the big house. We can see a lot of the stuff that they have in the cultural center, right? Masks and costumes and things that the Kwakwaka'wakw would have used traditionally. But as you can see, they're part of our modern world. They're not living a hunter-gatherer existence the way that the Hadza people were, right? But still there, right? Still living, some of them still living in their traditional territory, still hunting and fishing and doing, some of their traditional things, but also, living partially in the modern world as well, right? I'm sure all those people had smartphones in their back pockets while they were doing their dances, right? Well, I expect the Hadza did not, right? So it's kind of a different scenario. I'll try to give you a little bit more on indigenous people in BC maybe a little bit later in the course, okay? I don't want to forget about them. And maybe the last thing I'll say here for today is that, in some way, well, I don't know if it's sad or not, maybe it is, but, very few people make their living this way today, right? This is where we came from, right? As human beings, this is how we existed for 95% of our time as a species. We were outside, running around, hunting, fishing, gathering, digging eggs out of trees and fighting bees for their honey and things like that. That's kind of where we come from, right? That's the kind of animal that we are, right? An animal that can forage, an animal that can hunt, an animal that can run and walk very long distances. We have no time for it in this class, but I have a great documentary on human running and how our ability to run is very important to who we are and how we've evolved, right? Not speed run, right? Not Usain Bolt run, but run at a slow pace, but for a very, very long time, right? And again, that's one thing that humans are good at that other animals aren't, right? Other animals are fast, but they can't run for very long, right? Before they overheat or they just get tired. But humans can walk or slowly run for a very, very, very long time. 100 kilometers even would have been, for guys like the Hadza, they'll run 100 kilometers no problem, right? Just give them a little pouch with some food and they are off, right? But again, this is kind of our heritage or where we come from, but it's not really the way that most of us get our food anymore, right? Most of us live in the modern world with mechanized agriculture and grocery stores, or at the very least, farming, right? Where people are farming their own food. That's kind of what we'll come back to a little bit later this week. In terms of foragers today, you won't find that many. Most of them have kind of been pushed to the margins, right? They've been pushed to kind of the edge of civilization, or pushed to areas where it's not good farmland kind of thing, and they've been left to sort of do their own thing in those areas, either all like full-time hunter-gatherers or just kind of halfway, right? And so again, it's not very popular anymore. Most people are either farmers or are living off people who do farm, like us, right? Okay, let me just see. Yeah. I think that's kind of all I want to say for today. Well, I know we have about 6 or 7 minutes left, but I want to move on to some other things, and I think we've come to a natural pause. Does anyone have any questions or things they want to say or inquire about, or just, hey, I thought this was really neat that something happened? No? Should I release you all so you can forage for some food again? Yeah. You guys know where to find food, right? Yeah, you're experts in your environment. You know where to look for food and obtain it. Okay. All right, then I will leave it there for today. Tomorrow we'll do some critical thinking stuff, and then we'll talk about the switch to agriculture, which will be basically the biggest change that humans have ever embarked upon. Okay, it's not genetic technology, it's not the internet. I'm sorry, it's not computers or smartphones. It's actually agriculture. Agriculture makes everything about the modern world possible. Okay, but we'll get to that tomorrow and Friday. Okay, but until then, have a nice afternoon. Thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you tomorrow. Okay. All right. Online people, same thing. Have a nice afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow. Okay.